dignified work for all, regardless of gender, age, or background. This involves nurturing entrepreneurship, attracting investment, and supporting industries that promote sustainable growth. Additionally, Mr. Speaker, we must ensure fair wages, safe working conditions, and social protection measures to safeguard the rights and well-being of our workforce. Recognizing the importance of a robust social safety network, we commit to supporting the vulnerable among us. No citizen should face adversity alone, Mr. Speaker. And by reinforcing our social support systems, we strengthen the fabric of our society. In laying the foundation of our people's well-being, we also emphasize the values that define us: generosity, compassion, and unity. We celebrate our diversity and embrace the richness it brings to our collective tapestry. Mr. Speaker, this budget that is being presented here today to the Honourable Parliament for 2024 and 2025 financial years accounts not just for the novel challenges, but also for the possibilities of a prosperous road that lies ahead. The budget represents a government that has unwavering hope, a vision of well-being and success for all of our people. This budget invests in education and well-being of our children, providing health care and financial assistance to those in need, and ensuring the resiliency and protection of these beautiful Cayman Islands. Mr. Speaker, the appropriations set out in the bill now before Parliament, along with the budget documents that I tabled earlier today, form the government's 24-25 budget. The 24-25 budget align with the policies and projections outlined in our SPS. As is often the case, the amounts in the budget may vary from those in the SPS. The overall direction and the trend, however, remain consistent. The adjustments made to the SPS outcomes and position reflect the enhanced accuracy and currency of the information now at our disposal, serving as a more reliable foundation for these estimates. Mr. Speaker, before I provide the detail of 2024-2025 budget and government plans for those years, let me first summarize some of the key fiscal policies and headline figures that are contained in this budget. Mr. Speaker, the budget is in full compliance with the principles of responsible financial management as prescribed by the Public Management and Finance Act, or the PMFA. These principles are the same as those specified in the Framework for Fiscal Responsibility, which is also part of the PMFA. Core government, Mr. Speaker, is forecast to earn an operating revenue of $1,095 million in 2024 and $1,137 million in 2025. Core government's operating expenses are forecast to be $1,052 million in 2024 and $1,083 million in 2025. Financing expenses are forecast to be $18.4 million in 2024 and $24.7 million in 2025. Core government operating surpluses are forecast to be approximately $43 million in 2024 and $53.2 million in 2025. Closing cash balances are expected to be $388.7 million at the 31st of December 2024 and $412.1 million at the 31st of December 2025. Core government capital expenditure and investments are forecasted to be $160.5 million in 2024 and $117.9 million in 2025. Mr. Speaker, the capital expenditure and investments include equity investments into statutory authorities and government-owned companies totaling $35.2 million in 2024 and 24.3 million in 2025. Mr. Speaker, 2024 and 25 revenue forecast includes new revenue measures. The decision to implement these new measures was not at all taken lightly, and every effort, Mr. Speaker, was made to ensure that they would be non-inflationary and did not have a direct impact on the little man already suffering from the high cost of living. While the imposition of increased revenue enhancing measures may be viewed as a necessary challenge, it is crucial, however, Mr. Speaker, to understand that these measures are often undertaken to address specific financial demands or to achieve broader economic objectives. The revenue generated through these new measures plays a vital role in funding crucial public services, for example, healthcare and education, and other essential programs that contribute to the overall well-being of our society. The new revenue measures, which I will detail later in my address, Mr. Speaker, is projected to yield an additional 52 million in 24 and 80 million in 2025. Also, Mr. Speaker, in order to meet all of the government's planned capital investments over the budget period for 24 and 25, it includes borrowing of 150 million over the two-year budget period. Operating surpluses for 24 and 25 financial years are sufficient to fund capital expenditures and investment in these years, and as such, we will have to borrow during the two-year budget period. The plan and the estimate documents indicates that even with this proposed level of borrowing, the government debt to GDP ratio remains under the 10% level, which few countries in the world can match, Mr. Speaker. It is important to state, however, that government does not borrow to fund its day-to-day operating expenditures, and it will only use the proposed borrowings to fund capital expenditure and investments. I will provide further details on the borrowings later in my address. 2023 financial forecast. Mr. Speaker, before I provide the details for 2024-2025 budget and the government plan in those years, let me provide a brief update on the current state of the public sector finances and the forecast to the end of this financial year, being the 31st of December 2023. Operating revenues. They are forecasted to be 1.04 billion, which is some $56 million higher than estimated in the original 23 budget. The higher than budgeted operating revenues are mainly due to favorable variances in investment and tourism and property related revenues. Mr. Speaker, the operating and financing expenses for core government are forecasted to be 1.011 billion for 2023, which is 60.6 million greater than the original budget of 950.4 million. The major drivers for the increased operating expenses are as follows. Outputs from non-governmental output suppliers are anticipated to be $33.7 million higher than originally budgeted, primarily due to tertiary medical care, and this is no surprise, Mr. Speaker, at various local and overseas providers for uninsured and underinsured and indigent persons. Outputs from statutory authorities and government companies are projected to be 20.2 million more than original budgeted, primarily due to increased utilization and funding of the HSA. And transfer payments, or TPs, are forecasted to be 25 million more than budget due to an increase in scholarships and the financial assistance and pension uplift to our citizens. Mr. Speaker, personnel costs are trending to be 35.3 million lower than the budget in 2023, primarily due to delayed recruitment and improved efficiencies in our civil service. Statutory authorities and government companies are forecast to have a net operating surplus of 1.7 million for the year ending 31st of December 2023, compared to an original budgeted operating deficit of 19.1 million. The accumulated results for all of these changes is that core government is now forecast to achieve an operating surplus of approximately 22.7 million, which is only 5.1 million less than originally budgeted in the operating surplus of 27.8 million. Core government cash balance at the 31st of this year in December are forecasted to be $497.9 million, which is $185.7 million better than the $312.2 million that was originally budgeted for 2021 when the 2023 budget was prepared. Mr. Speaker, the higher than budgeted cash balances can primarily be attributed to strong, favorable variances in investment, tourism, and property-related revenue. Overall, the 2023 projections mean, Mr. Speaker, that government is forecast to be in full compliance with the principles of responsible financial management and the FFR. Core government's forecast operating surplus is expected, as I said, to be $22.7 million. Net worth is forecast to be a positive of $2.1 billion. The debt service ratio will be less than 10% of the core government's revenue at a projected 8.3%. The net debt ratio is forecast to be less than the maximum allowed of 80% of core government operating revenue at an estimated 9.3%. And cash revenues at the end of this month are forecast to be at 134.3 days of operating expenses, which is more than the minimum required of 90 days. Mr. Speaker, the economic forecast turning now for the upcoming two-year budget. In 2022, the global economy saw a 3.4% expansion, which we believe was driven by improved supply chain conditions and robust pent-up demand from the previous year. This growth followed a 6.3% increase in the prior year, which occurred amid the post-pandemic restrictions in 2020. Advanced economies, Mr. Speaker, experienced 2.7% rise in economic output compared to 5.4% growth observed in the preceding year. Projections indicate that the global economic activity is set to grow by 2.8% in 2023, with an acceleration of 3% in 2024. Over the medium term, Mr. Speaker, the world economy is expected to maintain an average growth of 3.2% between 2025 and 2027. The local economy will remain robust in 2022, with a gross domestic product, or GDP, expansion of 3.8%. Strong international demand was a key driver for notable expansions in a number of sectors, including hotels and restaurants, transportation, and the real estate sector, despite rising interest rates, with agriculture sector being the only sector to contract in 2022. Due to the global uncertainties, Mr. Speaker, such as fuel supply, geopolitical tensions, high interest rates, projections for the domestic economy, we anticipate a 3.1% growth in 2023, decelerating to 2.2% in 24, and averaging out at 2.5% between 25 and 27. The accommodation sector is projected to expand by 29.9% in 23 as a result of the global consumer demand remaining strong, resulting in Cayman stayover arrivals exceeding 80% of the pre-pandemic levels in the first half of 2023. The sector is projected, Mr. Speaker, to record an average growth of 14.9% per year between 24 and 27. The transportation sector is projected to also expand by 9% in 23 before moderating to an average growth of 3.1% between 24 and 27. Despite inflationary pressures, Mr. Speaker, the tighter monetary policy, the finance and insurance services sector is projected to expand by 1% in 23, 1.3% in 24. This steady performance is supported by stable demand for financial and insurance services and government initiatives, such as the implementation of the economic substance regulations. Growth in the sector is expected to average 1.7% over the medium term. Business services, which include legal and accounting services, is projected to expand by 1.9% in 23 before growing at an average rate of 2.6% between the years 24 and 27. The wholesale and retail sector is projected to rise by 3.4% in 23, with an average increase of 1.4% annually between 24 and 27. The electricity and water sectors are expanded to 3.7% and to an average of 2.6% annually between 24 and 27. In the construction sector, growth is expected to slow as the cost of funding for mortgages and investment rises, but several large-scale project, hotel and commercial projects could contribute to a modest expansion of 0.5% in 23, averaging 1.9% annually for 24 and 27. The real estate sector growth is also anticipated to moderately increase, with projections of 0.2% in 23 and 0.8% in 24, averaging to 2.1% annually between 25 and 27. Mr. Speaker, total employment surged by 22.7% to 53,355 in the fall 2022 labor force survey. Despite 18.3% rise in the labor force, the overall unemployment rate decreased by 2.1% in 2022. Over the medium term, Mr. Speaker, labor demand is anticipated to align with the GDP growth, driven by the expansion of accommodation services and other supporting sectors. Government initiatives prioritize the integration of Caymanians into the workforce, aimed to sustain low unemployment levels. Training and mentorship programs for Caymanian youth are also expected to contribute in this retooling effort. With the projected increase, Mr. Speaker, in the labor demand, a generally balanced labor market is expected, with a forecast of unemployment rate of 2.5% in 2023 and an average of 2.7% in the remaining 4 years. In 2022, despite the rise in international demand for financial and accommodation services, the Cayman Islands experienced an increase in total merchandise imports by 17.4%, reaching 1,498.7. This resulted in a narrowing of the deficit on the island's current account on the balance of payments, with a projected deficit balance of 698.3 million, which is equivalent to 12.2% of the GDP. Looking ahead, Mr. Speaker, projections indicate a current account balance of 13.8 in the GDP for 2020 and an average of 14.9 between 24 and 27. This stability, Mr. Speaker, is attributed to improvements in the tourism sector and increased imports. Mr. Speaker, the global rise in commodity prices triggered by Russia's military invasion in Ukraine in 2022 has had a significant repercussions to the cost of living here in Cayman. This geopolitical event, coupled with disruptions in trade agreements, escalating tensions between the US and China, led to heightened market uncertainties. In advanced economies, inflation's accelerated to 7.3 in 2022, with the US experiencing 8% increases in their prices. Cayman also felt the impact of rising prices, with the average consumer price index surging by 9.5% in 2022 and substantially rise the 3.3% recorded in 2021. In 2023, Mr. Speaker, the inflation in the Cayman Islands is projected to moderate to 5.2%, with an average inflation rate forecasted to be 2.2 annually between 24 to 2027. Mr. Speaker, the global economy is facing various risks and uncertainties in the post-COVID-19 era. Factors such as pricing pressures, labor market disruptions are challenging economic recovery. Despite these challenges, however, Mr. Speaker, the global economy has shown resilience, with positive growth and economic activity due to sustained demand. However, there are concerns about the impact of supply and restrictions by the Saudi Arabian and other OPEC countries, which have led to higher input costs, shipping charges, potentially affecting consumer demand. Mr. Speaker, in a slowdown, of course, in international demand for financial and accommodation services could hinder Cayman's projected growth, and the strength of their local demand can be tested in the near term. Higher interest rates could limit investments, weight on mortgage loans, slow down for residential demand, and further increase in the cost of living. However, Mr. Speaker, the general consensus seems to be an expectation of interest rates actually declining in the near to medium term. The 2024-2025 budget. Mr. Speaker, now turning to the details of the said budget. Operating revenue is forecasted to be at 1.09 billion, with 1.03 billion being coercive revenue and a balance of 61.4 million in sales and goods and services, investment revenue, donations, and other operating revenue. In 2025, operating revenue is forecasted to be 1.13 billion, with 1.07 billion in coercive revenue and the balance of 60.5 million in sales and goods and services, investment revenue, donations, and other operating revenue. Mr. Speaker, the revenue forecasts include new revenue measures that are projected to yield revenues of 52 million in 2024 and 80 million in 2025. The revenue measures are primarily related to administrative and regulatory related fees, which are charged by our general registry, the Department for International Tax Compliance, the Cayman Islands Monetary Authority, and the Department of Commerce and Investment. Increase to work permit application fees, an increase in the import duty rate on hybrid and electric vehicles valuing more than 70,000 Cayman Islands dollars, an increase in environmental tax payable with respect to these said vehicles with a cost, insurance, and freight value, or the CIF, for $80,000 or more. Increase in custom fines and procedural fines. Increase in the fees for immigration-related visas and extensions. And finally, Mr. Speaker, an increase to the stamp duty rate is being contemplated for properties purchased in certain high-end geographical areas on Grand Cayman. Operating and financial expenses for 2024 is forecast to be 1.05 billion and 1.08 billion in 2025. Mr. Speaker, the major cost drivers of the operating and financing expenses are: 1, personnel costs are budgeted to be 500.7 million in 2024 and 522 $153.3 million in 2025 to fund planned recruitment activities for additional mental health staff, enhanced remuneration for educators, enhanced resources for border control, increased resources for the promotion and regulation of our financial services industry, increases in health insurance premiums payable with respect to civil servants. 2, supplies and consumables are budgeted to be $175.4 million and $178 million in 2024-2025, respectively. Depreciation, a favorable topic of mine, is projected to be $59 million in 2024 and $59.5 million in 2025, and reflects the increase of the value of government's assets as various capital projects are completed. Mr. Speaker, it is important to remind all honorable members that the general public, as it relates to depreciation, it is a non-cash expenditure item which recognizes the cost of assets through the operating statement in a systematic way over the expected useful life of the project. Mr. Speaker, another cost driver of the operating expenditure is, of course, financing cost. As I mentioned earlier on today, 2024 and 25 budget allows the government to borrow up to $27 million in 24 and a further $123 million in 2025 for a total of $150 million over the 2 financial years. New borrowings should not be a surprise to this House, Mr. Speaker. In fact, in June 2020, a standby line of credit for $330 million or $403 million US was established. The purpose of the line of credit was to provide additional financial resources in the event that such resources were needed and to mitigate the effects of government's loss of revenue and increased expenditure related to COVID-19. Again, Mr. Speaker, during the 2022-2023 budget period, the then government, of which I was a part, borrowed $349 million. And I must say that this was due to the vision of the former Minister of Finance. And I wish to pause to congratulate him for his foresight, because it has served in a very positive way to our budget and was taken at the right time. It was used to fund capital investment by core government and investments into the statutory authorities and to the government companies. Mr. Speaker, of the $349 million that was borrowed during 22 and 23 budget period, 243, that is 123 in 2022, and a forecasted 120 for this year, was used to fund government's capital expenditure, leaving a projected balance of $106 million of unused borrowings from the 2022-2023 period that is available for use in the next 2 years. The balance of the projected unused borrowings from 2022 and 2023 of the $106 million, along with the 24 and 25 possible borrowings of the $150, will be applied to government's 24 and 25 capital program of an aggregate sum of $278.4 million. That is $160.5 million in 24 and $117.9 million in 2025. Mr. Speaker, I would like to emphasize that the proposed borrowings of $150 will only be used to fund government's capital program over the 24 and 25 financial years. And it's a good place, Mr. Speaker, to pause to say that when one scrutinizes the budget, they would see that $150 million is not applied solely for the Kimmerer School, but for the entire capital program for the 2 years. Section A and subsection 7 of the Plan and Estimates document captioned Debt Management, gives a more detailed analysis of the interaction between capital expenditure and borrowings. It also shows, Mr. Speaker, that government's debt to GDP ratio remains comfortably under 10%, which is an enviable metric that few countries in the entire world can match. Over the 24-25 budget period, the government will continue to keenly monitor its cash reserves and cash needs and will only draw down, and I repeat that for emphasis, Mr. Speaker, the government will only draw down on the loan funds if and when it is absolutely necessary to do so. As a result of existing and the new borrowings, the government is expected to incur financial costs of up to 18.4 million in 24 and 24.7 million in 25. These expenses cover the interest payments and other financing costs associated with core government's portfolio of debt. If the proposed borrowing of 150 are actually drawn down, Mr. Speaker, then it's estimated that government's end-of-year debt balances would be approximately 430.2 million for 2024 and 495.1 million for 2025. Mr. Speaker, government will continue to honor its obligation to pay our debt by paying approximately 49.9 million and 58.1 million in 2024 and 2025, respectively. Outputs from statutory authorities and government-owned companies or public entities, they are expected to total 179.1 million in 2024 and 186.2 million in 2025. The budget in this category, Mr. Speaker, will be used to fund the following: 58.9 million in 2024 and 64.2 million in 2025 to Cineco for the provision of health insurance, benefits to civil service pensioners and qualified seafarers and veterans. 46.3 million in 2024 and 2025 to HSA for the provision of various medical services to our communities. 33.8 million in 2024 and 35.5 million in 2025, the Cayman Islands Monetary Authority for enhanced regulatory capacity to keep abreast of the ever-changing international regulatory requirements. Mr. Speaker, 18.6 million per year for 24 and 25 to Cayman Airways Limited, and the provision of international airlift to the Cayman Islands from strategic tourism markets and domestic airlift between our three islands. Outputs from non-governmental output suppliers are expected to be 43.8 million in 2024 and 39.1 million in 2025. The major items in this category, Mr. Speaker, are 18.6 million in 24 and 14.4 million in 25 for tertiary medical care at various local and overseas providers for uninsured, underinsured, and indigent persons. 11.5 million in 24 and 11 million in 25 for public school meals program. 2.1 million in 24 and 2.9 million in 25 in respect to legal aid services. These amounts are entirely consistent with budgeted expenditure in the prior years. Mr. Speaker, 2 million per year in 24, 25 for the care of indigent and disabled elderly persons. TPs or transfer payments are forecasted to be 66.5 million in 24 and 64.3 million in 25. These funds will be used to deliver critical social programs that support our young people in achieving their educational goals and provide vital financial support to the most vulnerable in our society. The major transfer payments budgeted for 24 and 25 are as follows, Mr. Speaker. 23.8 million in 24 and 24.3 million in 25 for local and overseas scholarships to approximately 2,500 students per year to enable them to pursue advanced studies and acquire the skills necessary to build a modern Cayman job market. 15.2 million in 24 and 12 million in 25 for financial assistance to support approximately 1,500 households in our community. 10.9 million in 24 and 10.8 million in 25 for ex gratia payments to approximately 900 persons in respect of past service provided by a seaman and veteran, and 3.2 million in 24 and 25 for youth, sports, and heritage programs. Collectively, Mr. Speaker, the public entities are forecast to incur net deficit of 1.7 million in 2024 and 2 million in 2025. Most notably, the Cayman Islands Airport Authority is forecasting operating surpluses of $20.2 million in 2024 and $21.1 million in 2025. Cayman Airways is forecasting operating deficit in 2024 of $13.1 million and $12.1 million in 2025. The Cayman Turtle Conservation and Education Center Limited is forecasting an operating deficit of 9.5 in 24 and 10.1 in 2025. Mr. Speaker, for 2024, when considering the forecast operating revenues of 1.09 billion and the forecast operating and financing expenses of 1.05 billion, core government is forecast to earn an operating surplus of $43 million. When factoring the forecast of 1.7 million operating deficit of public entities, the entire public sector is forecasted to have an overall net surplus of 41.3 million in 2024. For 2025, Mr. Speaker, when considering the forecast operating revenues of 1.13 billion, the operating and financing expenses of 1.08 billion, core government is forecast to earn an operating surplus of 53.2 million. When factoring the forecast 2 million operating deficit of public entities, the entire public sector is forecast to have an overall net surplus of 51.2 million for 2025. Mr. Speaker, the government intends to make capital investments into ministries, portfolios, and offices of approximately 125.3 million in 2024 and 93.7 million in 2025. Mr. Speaker, these planned capital investments will be funded from borrowings and a small amount from operating revenues. The major investments in this category include 31.9 million in 2024, 33.9 million in 2025 for the continued expansion of educational facilities, including the new school on the BRAC, the development of a new high school in West Bay, continued expansion of the new John Gray High School Project B and C. 15.1 million in 2024 and 13.5 million in 2025 for the expansion, maintenance, and improvement of our road network. 11.8 million in 2024 and 8.6 million in 2025 for the Central Scranton Park, other various park and district upgrades, civic centers and jetties, and infrastructural and other development. 7.4 million in 2024, 4.2 million in 2025 for the improvement of the prison facilities. 3.8 million per year in 2024 and 25 for land acquisition for farming and the conservation protection for securing Cayman's natural environment. And Mr. Speaker, the government also believes in conservation and will, as I indicated earlier, be seeking from Finance Committee approval to allow for the use of $10 million from the EPF fund for the acquisition of land, including beach property, for conservation purposes. In addition, Mr. Speaker, the government is planning to make capital investments into public entities totaling $35.2 million in 24 and a further $24.2 million in 25. These investments include $12.1 million in 24 and $9.1 million in 25 to Cayman Airways to cover debt servicing and operating expenditures. $8 million in 24 and $7 million in 25 to the National Housing Development Trust to cover debt servicing obligation and construction of affordable homes. $8.4 million in 24 and $5.3 million in 25 to the Cayman Turtle Conservation and Education Center Limited to cover operating expenditure. And Mr. Speaker, $2.1 million in 2024 and $1.1 million in 2025 to the University College of the Cayman Islands, or UCCI, to fund operational deficits. Mr. Speaker, with respect to the compliance to the principles of responsible financial management set out in the Public Management and Finance Act and the Framework for Fiscal Responsibility, the 2024-2025 budget forecast the following levels of compliance and principles. Net operating results should be positive. Core government's revenue should be greater than its expenses. For 24 and 25, Mr. Speaker, compliance is achieved as the core government is forecast to record a net operating surplus of $43 million in 2024 and $53.2 million in 2025. Would make any MP want to run in 25. Net worth should be positive. Core government assets, less its liabilities, should be positive. The government net worth is forecast to be $2.2 billion at the 31st of December 2024 and $2.2 billion at the end of this year. Sorry, for December 2025. Debt servicing. That is, Mr. Speaker, the annual payments of interest and principal related to all public sector borrowing commitments should be no more than 10% of core government's revenue. I'm happy to say that the core government is forecast to have a debt servicing ratio of 8.4 in 24 and 7.8 in 25. Net debt, that is the total debt of the core government plus the weighted average debt balance of the public entities, less core government's liquid assets, should be no more than 80% of core government's revenue for the fiscal year. This for sure brings the teacher and me out and probably would have resulted in an A+ because our debt ratio, Mr. Speaker, is forecasted to be a mere 17.5% in 2024 and 19% in 2025, which is well below the maximum of 80% limit. Cash reserves. The unrestricted cash reserves of the operating bank account and general reserves of the core government, measured at the lowest point in the fiscal period, should be sufficient to cover 90 days of core government's estimated operating expenditures. For 2024, Mr. Speaker, the government is forecast to have sufficient cash reserves to cover approximately 94.1 days of operating expenditures at its very lowest point during the financial year. And in 2025, it is forecast to have 104.3 days of cash reserve. Both years, Mr. Speaker, are above the 90 days minimum requirement. Mr. Speaker, as I conclude, laying the foundation for our people's well-being requires a comprehensive approach that encompasses healthcare, education, employment, social cohesion, environmental sustainability, and our financial and tourism industries. By investing in these pillars, Mr. Speaker, we can create a society that is healthy, that is prosperous, that is resilient. Let us therefore, Mr. Speaker, work together, hand in hand, to build a brighter future for all. Mr. Speaker, on behalf of the United People's Movement, the UPM, we would like to take this opportunity to thank Her Excellency the Governor yet once again, official members of Cabinet, parliamentary sectors, my Cabinet ministers, chief officers and their staff for their support, guidance, patience, and commitment in producing the 2024 budget and 2025 budget. Special thanks must also be made to the Ministry of Finance in assisting the government to finalize the 2024-2025 budget. And Mr. Speaker, if I would crave your indulgence, so just take a little extra time to say how extremely appreciative I am to the finance dream team who has made my life so much easier after perhaps less than a week in pulling this together. Long, arduous nights. Never complain, never ask for a raise of pay. And although I was very equitable in giving the $1,500, I am hoping that come next year, with the performance and the fiscal responsibility, that we would have reached where we can give honorariums for performance. So, Honorable DG, I put you on notice that I would be recommending the finance team to be first through the gate. Having said that, Mr. Speaker, I would also like to express my sincere gratitude to the resilient and enduring people of our beloved Cayman Islands. Special thanks also to the members of the opposition. I am fully cognizant that their role is to be a loyal opposition. I've been there before, but because it's a Christmas season, I am cautiously optimistic that their graciousness will dare not dwell or enter into the Scrooge territory, but because we all want together for Christmas, I anticipate that they will do their usual due diligence and give the Parliament and the civil servants and the country an early Christmas, meaning post 23rd of December. That's wishful thinking. If you don't ask, you don't get, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, having said that, may our efforts today sow the seeds of a future where the well-being of our people stand as a testament to our shared commitment. After all, our performance will ride on our commitment. Thanks be to Almighty God for His blessings on our lovely Cayman Islands. Mr. Speaker, with that, I humbly commend the appropriation financial years 2024-2025 Bill 2023 to this Honorable Parliament, and I would respectfully ask all honorable members for their full support to this bill, and I look forward to their debate. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Madam Premier. Madam Clerk.
Motion for the deferral of debate on the budget address.
I call on the Honorable Premier to move the motion.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I beg to move that it be resolved that the debate on the address delivered by Her Excellency the Governor, Mrs. Jean Oyen.
No, Madam Premier. We've done that one. This is your address. The narrative in the program is wrong.
Sorry, I was following the program. So, sorry, Mr. Speaker. I come from the background where the Bible says that the obedient inherit the good of the land. I was merely following the wrong program.
I question everything.
I beg to move, Mr. Speaker, that it be resolved that the throne speech, the policy statement, and the budget address be debated simultaneously on Monday, the 11th of December, 2023.
Madam Premier, I'm sorry to do this to you, but I think we've gone a little ahead of ourselves. What we need at the moment is a motion for the deferral of the debate on your address, which is the budget address, which should be in the following terms. Be it resolved that the debate on the budget address be deferred until Monday, the 11th of December, 2023. The motion that you just sought to move will follow that.
It's wrong.
Yes, it's wrong.
Two minds are better than one. Both programs are wrong. Let's get it right this time. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I beg to move that the debate on the budget address be deferred until Monday, the 11th of December, 2020, on the appropriation bill. 2023. Oh, I want to go Kevin Bragg today.
The question is, be it resolved that the debate on the budget address be deferred until Monday, the 11th of December, 2023. Those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against, no. The ayes have it. The motion is carried.
Motion for the throne speech, the policy statement, and budget address to be debated simultaneously.
Madam Premier,
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I beg to move that it be resolved that the throne speech, the policy statement, and the budget address be debated simultaneously on Monday, the 11th day of December, 2023.
the question is, be it therefore resolved that the debate on the throne speech, policy statement, budget address.
That's it.
Mine is wrong now too. We'll get it right. Don't panic. I'll start again. The question is, be it resolved that the throne speech, the policy statement, and the budget address be debated simultaneously on Monday, the 11th of December, 2023. Those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against, no. The ayes have it. The budget address, the policy statement, the budget address, and the throne speech will be debated simultaneously on Monday, the 11th of December, 2023. Madam Premier, that brings us to the end of the business on the order paper. May I invite you to move the adjournment of this honorable House until 10 a.m. on Monday coming.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I beg to move the adjournment of this honorable House until 10 a.m. Monday, the 11th of December.
The question is that this honorable House now be adjourned until Monday, the 11th of December at 10 a.m. Those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against, no. The ayes have it. The House is accordingly adjourned until Monday, the 11th of December at 10 a.m.
Job, a lot of them are.
Good afternoon, Andre. How are you?
Not too bad, sir.
Ladies and gentlemen,
Radio Cayman's Talk Today with Sterling Dwayne Ebanks.
But I do have some questions.
There are more questions than answers.
Radio Cayman's Talk Today. If you're ready to talk, we're willing to listen.
Well, I really enjoy this program today.
Cayman Islands' foremost listeners participation program.
May God bless every person.
You're welcome. And thank you very much for joining us. Thursdays have been billed for me as thoughtful Thursdays, and when we can move our monthly mental health matters to a Thursday, well, even better. You want to know what we're going to be talking about? Dr. Alexandra Borden, as usual, has assembled a fantastic panel. So please join us for more Talk Today.
Talk Today is brought to you by Subway, open 24 hours in Countryside, Anderson Square in Georgetown, and Centennial Towers in West Bay. And by the Ministry of District Administration. Explore your history, explore your land, explore your sister islands. And Cayman Airways. Call them on 949-2311 to book your nonstop flights to Los Angeles and Panama. And now, Barbados. And Digicel, Cayman's bigger, better network. And Doctors Hospital. Peace of mind is important when life happens. Doctors Hospital, always there for you. Call 949-6066.
Radio Cayman's Talk Today, the Cayman Islands' foremost listeners' participation program. We ask our listeners to avoid statements or comments which are abusive, derogatory, malicious, or defamatory. Do not use any indecent language or make any statement which is false or misleading. Email talktoday@candw.ky or call 1-800-534-8255. Courtesy of Flow.
Cayman's #1 network that connects you to your world like never before.
Let your voice be heard. Once again, here's your host, Sterling Dwayne Ebanks.
You're welcome. And thanks for joining us. And of course, our phone lines are always available. But it's always good to set the stage and to Dr. Alexandra Borden. Once again, thank you. Being able to speak so, publicly about a topic that sometimes can be sensitive and overwhelming to some helps us to be more appreciative. So thank you very much, ma'am.
Yeah, no, and thank you for always having us here under Radio Cayman, for giving us this time, and to everyone who supported the show over the years as well. I know it takes a lot of courage to come in, and we appreciate people taking time out of their busy schedules to come in and give back to the community in this way.
So rewarding, I think, and the community has benefited greatly. Just having the discussions about our health and wellness and our mental health, and understanding that talking to someone about something is essential.
Yeah.
So excited as we have our discussions and go towards the end of the year that we can set the stage for ourselves for next year. Purposeful and poised for very positive and productive things. Huh?
Yep, that's the plan. And so today we're excited to look at, as we're coming up to Christmas, there's a lot of things that always come to mind, but I will say, so I've been worried about Cayman recently with the increase in violence. So today's show, I kind of wanted to look at a couple of different things, because I know when we've looked at things in the past, when we've looked at things like, we've looked at like deviance, antisocial behavior, substance abuse, working with youth, a lot of the times we talk about the importance of prevention and the community being proactive, and yes, therapy and treatment is good. And there's a lot of therapy providers on island, lots of other treatment providers on island as well. But what I wanted us to look at, especially with the spirit of the holidays coming up, is how we can all come together as a community, because that's really going to be the best way of engaging everyone and bringing everyone together to reduce not only the stress and the incidence of mental illness, but also the risk of crime and violence as well. And so I thought this is the perfect time for us to begin to look at how Cayman can come together as a community with all of its many facets and amazing multicultural atmosphere to come together to support each other as a community.
We would often hear a house divided can't stand, and unity there's strength. And I think that's important that this time it all is happening just within our own reach.
For sure.
To have a unified front.
Yeah.
So,
and I think especially in Cayman, one of the big things is, especially with, the 150 something.
I heard 200
nationalities, right? There's so many people here, and with 35,000 of them coming in last year, there's a lot of factors that need to be taken into consideration as we're moving forward. So it's amazing the amount of diversity we have represented, but that with that comes a lot of benefits, but also some challenges that we need to come together to work through.
And that socioeconomic impact, the change demographic, it's not unlike a company employing people and not having them acclimated and understanding their own sort of the culture of the company. But in the Cayman context, we're going mile a minute.